Hello and welcome to this June 12th, 2022. It is a Sunday, and this is another episode of my Misfits of the Galaxy vlog, a series in which I put my thoughts together and ramble and amble about a prospective campaign I want to run for my fellow players of the Isle of Misfit Rolls podcast. If you haven't heard of us before, I will put links down below. As I stated previously in the last episode, I think it was, that I've rotated this over to Sundays from Saturdays, simply because it's just more convenient for me. My Saturdays are a pretty hectic schedule to begin with, and I was just finding myself rushing these episodes. With Sundays, I can take a more leisurely pace. One of my friends made an inquiry earlier this week and said, "Well, why exactly are you doing this? Like, why are you putting these vlogs together? Is it like you're addressing an audience all the time?" Well, it's like I this is my process. I'm trying to get my thoughts and ideas on paper, but sometimes it's easier to talk things out. Additionally, if we ever get to playing this, I think it'd be really cool to release these episodes to the public at large in hopes that they can appreciate the process that took place in order to put this campaign together. In fact, I'm really looking forward to people's comments and going back later and seeing how things have changed from my initial ideas and thoughts to what the finished product is going to end up like. So today I'm going to talk about another world that I've been working on, as well as a idea that about the possibility of what I call recursions. I'll get to that later. So the world in question is called Hyss, Hyss, and throughout the verse, there are various worlds that are quarantined for one reason or other. The world of Thanatos, which I'm changed to Mortis now, the undead world, that's quarantined for obvious reasons. Some worlds are quarantined to prevent the contamination and exploitation of the primitive worlds, like primitive species and the native population and what have you. That's generally if the uh, civilizations around it are more altruistic in nature, since others prefer to exploit such resources. Uh, Additionally, some worlds are like in the Elven Empire. The are like natural worlds, very similar to that, where they try to keep the nature untouched by anything. Fey worlds also come to mind, which can prove to be exceedingly dangerous to mortals in some instances. Some worlds are quarantined because they're just deemed too dangerous. Apex predators like giant kaiju monsters that make the Terrask look like small potatoes, or maybe there's a massive spell plague going across the world that to risk going down to go down there is to risk contaminating like the starfaring civilizations with a terrible spell plague that could wipe out a significant portion of the population, or completely screw up magic. These are reasons why um, a world might be quarantined. In the case of Hyss, quarantine measures have been imposed due to the danger of its native inhabitants, which and how what they pose to the danger that they pose to the rest of the galaxy. In this case, the native population consists of the Serpent people, the Yuan-ti. Um, the Yuan-ti unto themselves are just like any other race. Uh, the reason they pose a threat is their more insidious nature of infiltrating societies with their purebloods and the like. There have actually been in the history of at least the human empire, which I haven't named yet. Uh, there's been several instances where the Yuan-ti have tried to seize power, and it's just gotten to this point where finally it's like, you know what, we're just going to quarantine their main home, their home world, leave like a small contingency fleet on the outskirts of the system, and just make sure that no one goes in, no one comes out. And since the Yuan-ti on Hyss are not a starfaring race unto themselves at this present time, having the technology been removed, having lost the technology, or I should say the technology has been repressed from them, they are pretty much planet locked at this point. Now, that's not to say there's not Yuan-ti throughout the verse. There's quite a few, actually, typically in small pockets here and there in isolated regions. These are suspected to be outpost settlements that from the world of Hyss, that over thousands of years of isolation have descended into like almost primitive barbarism. Meanwhile, this Hyss at one point was a significant uh, starfaring, like powerful starfaring race who has regressed over time, partially because of these restrictions that have been imposed on them, and the fact that their civilization has been had the ever living snot bombed out of them. And anything that would allow them to like leave their planet has been removed from their world. As I said before, the reasoning behind this is uh, on as several. As I stated, several instances in the human empire, they've tried. Their purebloods have tried to seize power. Additionally, cults and that have been found have been rooted out in the Elven Empire, perhaps even the Dwarven Empire or the Dwarven Thanes, and maybe even, but very unlikely amongst the Halflings and Gnomes. As I said before, it has to do with their insidious nature. They revere a primordial serpent god, serpent entity, and they're very cold-blooded. They're a caste-based system, and while the purebloods themselves are considered the lowest rung of their castes, they are also the ones that are able to infiltrate other civilizations fairly easily. They often remind me of the Gene Stealer cult from Warhammer 40k to a certain extent, where they'll end up on a world, and they'll start off small and hidden as a hidden cult, and their numbers will swell slowly over time. Um, I believe it was. I think it was Icewind Dale, the Icewind Dale video game, Icewind Dale 2. I might be wrong about that, but that had to do with a Yuan-ti cult, if I recall correctly. Uh, I may be wrong, of course. And the entire issue of it, like um, infiltrating other civilizations and the like, was in there, as well as their rather horrific breeding programs where they were like trying to create more arcane casters amongst their number, partially because like for them, very few of them can cast arcane magic. Most of them are divine casters, being worshiper, like getting getting their gifts bestowed upon them by their divine patron, that serpent god. I think it's Set, if I recall correctly, or something similar to that effect. And there are few, like I said, the arcane casters are few in number. They probably have a few warlocks that use the serpent serpent primordial or serpent god as a patron, but most of them are the arcane casters are sorcerers, right? And they try to because it's in their bloodline. They're trying to um, strengthen said arcane bloodline in hopes of gaining more power. So at least that was what was happening, as I said in that video game. That's a bit of rambling about that. That's a little off topic. So as I said, the world of Hyss is like is a very hot and humid world. Very like it has a very thick ozone layer and with a lot of greenhouse gases, meaning that all the heat is trapped in the world, like trapped in the atmosphere fairly easily. Um, Not very many, like not us. There's a few small inland seas here and there, but most of the water gets due to the heat, uh, basically evaporates and lots of rain all the time, meaning that the world is covered in fetid swamps as well as tropical rainforests for the most part. There's a few mountain ranges here and there, and there might be a little bit of snow in the polar regions, but very little, to say the very least. Because because of such there's so much plant life, it's an oxygen-rich atmosphere, meaning that a lot of the local flora and fauna grow quite large. We're looking at massive, like the insects, the size of what we assume that in our world, the like various insect races or species would be during the era of the dinosaurs, which would be at the very least the size of a mid-sized. Most insects are about the size of a mid-sized dog. Some are small dog-sized, and what have you. Uh, so yeah, that, and of course you will have dinosaurs, and you will have giant snakes and frogs and all sorts of other cold-blooded creatures that are well suited for the climate. Not to mention a plethora of piscine, like fish species as well. The Yuan-ti themselves are almost the uh, sole sentient species on this world. There's a few pockets of like lizard folk, as well as maybe some troglodytes. I hope I pronounced that correctly here and there. Not to mention um, several human and other races that are primitive tribes living in remote, isolated areas, because that's the only place they could survive, as the Yuan-ti would have readily enslaved them and sacrificed them to their dark god. So the world, as for the Yuan-ti civilization, it was bombed back into effectively the Stone Age by the various spacefaring civilizations when they realized what the Yuan-ti were doing. They would have wiped them entirely out, except the mass extermination of another species is against multiple treaties that the various spacefaring races have. Uh, so what happened was they bombed them back into the Stone Age, left them with, and then isolated them by the quarantine measures. At this point, they've gotten back into, I guess the best description would be the early Bronze Age. rebuilding their civilization with massive ziggurats and stone structures and the like, jutting their way out of the tropical jungles here and there. And as I said, they've started using metallurgy again, and they've gotten to the point where they're using softer metals like bronze, since the harder metals like iron and steel are still well above their capabilities at this point. However, since many of them have, many of their species have divine magic at their disposal, not to mention they have a fair bit of arcane magic, particularly warlocks and sorcerers amongst their ranks. Uh, they, they still pose a threat for the galaxy at large if they ever get off their homeworld. Okay, so yeah, that's what I was going to say about Hyss at this point. It's a bit of rambling, a bit of repeat, what have you. I guess the next thing I wanted to talk about was recursion worlds. So one of my friends was listening to who will remain anonymous for this point at this point, but they know who they are, and I'll say hi to them so if they watch it for watching this. Uh, Made some inquiries about, okay, well, in one of the earlier episodes I talked about the the void, like the void engines, and like how hyperspace travel works with the Maw stations and everything else, and how very similar to the Warhammer 40k warp, um, you could end up either when you travel through one, you could be at your destination in an instant, or you could like end up taking weeks, or months, even maybe even years. Uh, what what you thought was going to take a very short amount of time, and you can even actually end up arriving before you left, right? Uh, because the void is this really bizarre place where the laws of physics and that don't apply. So with that in mind, they asked, well, what happens if you end up arriving before before you left in a significant amount of time? Like you end up time traveling effectively into the past, and you go to a world and you alter the course of its history. Right? What exactly happens if you end up getting back to the present? And I thought about it for a moment, and I said, you know what? The verse is a really bizarre, strange place, to say the very least. And so there's going to be what are called recursion worlds, which are if somebody uses a Maw station and ends up going into the past and changing the world, like changing the history of one of the worlds, or maybe even an entire empire or civilization or what have you. Again, then somehow gets back to the present. Uh, the the present hasn't been altered by their actions. However, what there will what there will be is wizards and priests and that will have access to a recursion world, which is almost like it's very similar to the Shadow Realm and the Feywilds, where they are interconnected to a world, and like they're the closest alternate planes of existence that are almost mirrors. One being a dark necrotic reflection, and the other one being like full of life energy, right? Well, recursion worlds kind of affix themselves to a world in a very similar manner, right? And you can where the barriers are in some places, particularly where the events that were orchestrated to alter history occurred, the barrier between said worlds becomes paper thin. and sometimes things come out from the other side, and sometimes things are able to go in. Magic, like I said, priests and wizards and what have you, are capable of, I guess, poking holes in the and passing through those barriers a lot easier with various types of magic at their disposal. So some worlds have multiple recursions that are all kind of like affixed to them in a real strange way and what have you. And if you were looking at them interdimensionally, it looks like DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths, because there's just so many recursions attached to it. It's an idea I'm playing around with because I think it would be really cool, like if like the characters went to a world that is peaceful, almost utopian in nature, and all of a sudden, from like a dimensional rift on this world, a very militaristic or civilization starts pouring through and attacking cities and what have you, and you come to the realization these are the same people. They're like they're fighting like the people who the nice peaceful utopian world are they're the same species. They're the same civilization that lives on this world. Something happened in this alternate world that like has turned them into an aggressive military faction, and now they're trying to invade themselves. What do you do in that sort of situation, especially if the party is in some way responsible for it? You know, one of them left like a fire wand or something like that in the past, and it got reverse engineered far earlier than it should have by the dominant species, or maybe it wasn't even a dominant species. It was a species that was competing and losing against the dominant species for a while. You can have this very sort of Sliders TV series style events unfolding on a single world, furthering the sandbox, like expanding the sandbox even beyond just exploring, going interplanetary. We can go interdimensional or interworld, I guess you call it. Anyways, that's a bit of rambling about that, and as I said, I don't know if I'm going to use it or not. It was a thought. It was a thought that came up when you're dealing with D&D, with the possibility of time travel. You kind of gotta have at the very least you have to have some sort of like train of thought on this matter, whether it be, oh, you just can't alter time, or it's a constant, or something like that. Whatever it is, you kind of have to have these. You can definitely come up with these answers on the fly, but I find that it's a bit easier as a dungeon master to manage them if you happen to have an idea as to how they work when before the players drop that unexpected bomb on you. Anyways, I've rambled for about just over 23 minutes right now about this stuff. Tune in next week. I don't know what I'm gonna discuss next week. I might go back to some of the material that I've already spoken about, and if I have a few things that I'm tweaking and changing for that said material, and so I might readdress those, or I might talk about another world, or maybe a class, or maybe another species. Who knows? Anyways, till then, I hope that all your D20s come up critical. Take care.